All right. Once again, everyone, good afternoon. Logan Noel Andrus with WASDA. Happy March 20th. This will be the last in-session live related to the 2026 legislative session. Today, during our time together, we plan to share about essentially breaking down the policy changes for districts as a result of this session, funding changes for districts. We'll get a little bit of feedback from you. We have a couple of very simple, one or two choice questions just to try to use that. We'll start some dialogue with the Advocacy Action Network during the spring and summer to help think about how we might be able to make our legislative updates that much more valuable to you. And then we'll share a little bit about what we've got cooking for the interim. This work is year round, as you hear us say often. And just because the legislative session has ended does not mean this work ends. Just sort of wanted to start with some gratitude this afternoon. I know that the outcomes and results of this session are not good, honestly, for a lot of K-12, and yet the work that we did do to fight off lots of bad ideas that did not become reality and to reduce harm as much as possible around some of the bad things that did come into play could not have been done without a large collective of advocates. That includes all of you for being a part of this space, for doing advocacy with your legislators. Members of WASDA's legislative committee and board of directors all played significant roles in helping to shape outcomes and engage. Also, just want to give a shout out to our consultants, Kyla Scarich Blair and Daniel Pelthorpe. They were a great help to Cynthia and I this year, and also to all of our education advocacy partners and the other statewide associations. Some of the pictures that you see on the slides here were taken in moments of levity during the session. That top photo is a picture of the legislative committee at legislative conference this past January before session started. And anyway, just sort of want to say thank you to all of you for being contributors to this work. And in advance, thank you for the work that we're going to continue to do moving forward. Okay, so we're going to start with policy, and then we're going to move to budget. Just one second, I'm sorry. So we're going to move into policy changes. Okay, so where we wanted to start for you all is essentially on new school year require or new school district requirements. Some of the bills that passed that will essentially change things for you all. The first one that we want to bring to your attention is the new prohibition on some restraint practices, as well as new or remodeled isolation rooms. That's House Bill 1795. That bill prohibits mechanical restraint, chemical restraint, and physical restraint or physical escort of a student's life unless there's a life-threatening situation in schools. This bill will go into effect, or these requirements will go into effect for districts starting July 1st. So I want you to know that. Additionally, House Bill 2534 changes some of the requirements for you all around children of military families. You can read the bill and our written in session summary to sort of get a full detailed list, but it essentially will expand and clarify enrollment rights for children of military families that relocate to Washington. There are some timeline changes for school districts that essentially have to do with the timeline by which families and students will have to provide proof of residency, for example. And there's also some new requirements in there for districts about making sure that services that are on existing IEPs for students that might be transferring into your district are provided promptly for those students. Additionally, House Bill 2557 changes some timelines around special education evaluation reports. Essentially, school districts are now required to provide these evaluation reports to families by no later than the 35th school day of the year. And there is some other timeline changes around the timeline by which school districts will have to um, have these meetings with parents and families. So be sure to check that out. And then lastly, House Bill 2632 relates to non-citizen terminology, essentially removing references in state law and all like public documents, removing the term alien from those documents and replacing it with non-citizen. So just want you to know that those are coming down the line, and each of those will be linked and shared in our written in-session document, as well as any of those that touch on model policy, for example. We'll be working to update those as an agency over the course of the spring and summer. So watch for those changes coming in the next few months. Two more bills that do add new school district requirements. These ones won't go into place until the 2027-28 school year, but still want you to know about them. House Bill 1295 is about evidence-based K-4 literacy programs. And it basically says when or if a school district decides to update their curriculum around early literacy, reading literacy, or writing literacy, there are some new requirements about some of the particular components that those curriculums might have to include. Thinking about things like multisensory, multimodal students, making sure that those curricula are culturally relevant. Um, and there's a number of other requirements in there. And this requirement, again, is only when you go to update those particular curriculum. It's not mandating every district to go out and do those updates by the 2027-28 school year. It's just saying as you update after that school year or during that school year, you'll need to make sure that that curriculum meets some new requirements. Additionally, Senate Bill 5841 has to do with post-secondary financial aid eligibility. We talked about this one early on in session, and essentially what this is going to mean for you all. It'll work to make some of our statewide systems talk to each other around high school and beyond planning, as well as FAFSA and financial aid completion and application. In particular for school districts, though, there will be some requirements as practical for school districts to make sure they're reviewing financial aid eligibility with students. There is a to the extent practicable included in the bill, but still want you all to know that that's coming down the line starting in the 27-28 school year. Other bills that you should know about. We're going to go through each one just at a high level. Again, really want to make sure that we are informing you about what's coming down the line. And again, as you have questions, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A box. House Bill 1634 essentially helps to create a technical assistance network at the state level by OSPI as well as the Educational Service District Association that essentially will provide a framework that school districts can optionally use to better support student behavioral health in districts. House Bill 1796 essentially expands school districts' authority to incur debt for school construction and related capital purposes. This essentially has to do with borrowing money from a past levy and then paying it back over time. That's not a requirement, but it's an option for districts, and school districts can start tapping into that option beginning July 1, 2026. House Bill 1960 is about renewable energy. This bill would essentially, in areas where there are like lots of wind farms going up and things like that, it would essentially exempt new energy equipment from property taxes that would normally contribute to your local tax base that support school districts thinking about levies. And it would replace that revenue with a new renewable energy excise tax that remains being distributed to districts based on existing levy shares. We talked about this bill a couple times during the session and didn't get that much feedback. Our understanding is that it will not impact that many districts in the state. But this bill is out there. These tax changes go into effect January 1, 2028. House Bill 2225 is about AI chatbot companions and essentially requires that any users of companion chatbots receive a notification that they are specifically interacting with artificial intelligence and not a human. And for the case of any AI that you might use in your districts, this does not apply to narrowly tailored educational tools that are used in a school or in an instructional setting that is designed solely for the purpose of supporting your curricula and other school activities. House Bill 2317 has to do with early learning licensing. And this bill essentially will exempt school day ECAP programs and Head Start programs licensing requirements when the program is located at a public school. So there's some licensing changes for ECAP and Head Start included there. Finally, for this slide, House Bill 2360 authorizes public and private schools to maintain a supply of undesignated albuterol beginning in the 2027-28 school year, essentially allowing nurses and some other trained staff to administer it to students that are experiencing respiratory issues, such as like an asthma attack, for example. Not a requirement, but it is an option for districts should you all choose to do that. House Bill 2594 is about equal access to education for our unhoused youth. This bill essentially copies and pastes some of the federal McKinney-Vento protections that students have right now into state law. Want to let you know that happened. It's a good double protection for our unhoused youth across Washington state. Additionally, Senate Bill 5272 has to do with intimidation and interference penalties, essentially expanding the penalties for school-related crimes of interference by force or violence, and then intimidation by threat or force of violence. So it both changes the timeline and the fines that are included there. That's a bill that popped back up at the end of session from 2025. But that bill did make its way down the line. Want you to know that. Senate Bill 5346 about student use of mobile devices did pass. This is one that early on in session was actually going to require school districts to adopt model policies limiting or prohibiting the use of students using mobile devices during instructional hours. That part of the policy was not included at final passage. Right now, essentially, that's going to require OSPI to do some research, essentially pulling together some of the policies and procedures that are out there in districts, trying to understand how those were put together, what worked really well, and what might have been barriers for districts. And then that bill will also require OSPI to come back and report all of that to the legislature. So right now it's mostly a data and research collection bill for OSPI as of this session. Senate Bill 5922 is about transportation vehicle fund transfers. And it essentially allows districts to transfer vehicle depreciation payments and earn interest from their transportation budget into another fund, such as maybe the operating budget, subject to approval from OSPI. I'm going to stop and take a look. I see something popped into the question box. Dave Larson asks if 2594 included any funding and asks if it's considered part of basic education. Dave, I can tell you for sure that they did not include any funding for that bill at this time. And I don't know the answer of if they included that as a part of basic ed in our state, but I'll be happy to look into that and get back to you. Okay, a couple more. Senate Bill 5963 essentially it expands eligibility and actually automatic eligibility for the Washington College Grant to include students that are experiencing foster care ages 13 and up, or students that are unaccompanied and experiencing homelessness. Um, and they will get full tuition to any public college beginning in the 2026-27 school year. All students who fall within those experiences become automatically income eligible, is essentially the mechanism that they used for that eligibility. So just good opportunities to share with students. Additionally, Senate Bill 5969 requires the statewide online IEP program and system to be talking to the statewide online high school and beyond plan system, making sure that those two plans that students may be working on are coordinated and aligned, and it also is supposed to help with reducing duplication of input that you all are having to do when you're managing two sets of plans. So that bill will go into effect starting next year. A couple more for you. Senate Bill 5994 essentially extends timber tax revenue distributions to school districts without qualifying levies in a given calendar year, if the district had qualifying levies in effect during either of the previous 2 years. So it's essentially saying, hey, we will keep your timber tax distributions at the same level for districts. This is a small but important win for districts who really rely on those funds. Senate Bill 6065 is another transportation related bill that allows school districts that are in binding conditions or under enhanced financial oversight to take a temporary interest-free interfund loan from its transportation vehicle fund and then petition OSPI to transfer that money from the transportation fund into another fund. So there's some more flexibility provided for districts there that are in enhanced financial oversight. Senate Bill 6134, just good for you all to know. It requires some notices going to striking workers about applying for unemployment insurance. The Employment Security Department at the state will now be required to provide that notice to striking workers applying for unemployment insurance benefits about the potential overpayment assessment. So I want you to know that that's out there and happening. Two more. Senate Bill 6268 is about online records of special education complaint decisions, essentially now requiring OSPI to post publicly on their website records of all special education complaint decisions dating back 20 years. So there will be sort of a new piece of data and lengthier piece of data that'll be on OSPI's website about special ed complaints. And then finally, Senate Bill 6268 is about essentially how teacher and principal prep programs are reviewed in our state, essentially saying that there are some new requirements that PESB, that's the Professional Educator Standards Board, will have to make sure that they're doing as they are reviewing those preparation programs. So that's a whole lot of bills. I talked at you a bunch. Some of those are required, as we spoke about in the beginning. Others of those are not required and new sort of options or opportunities that could, enhance supports for students or provide flexibility for districts. There will be links to resources, bill summaries, and sort of other supports and services that are connected to all of these topics that come out to you later today in our in-session legislative summary report. So be sure to check there for more information. Okay, moving on to funding. We're going to start with some good news, and that is that the sales tax exemption from 2025, the temporary staffing, live presentations, taxes, that have really been a burden and an unintended consequence of last legislative session have will officially be exempt for schools, school districts, and ESDs beginning July 1st, 2026. Just want to also let you know that the provision that essentially passed this exemption was included as a part of Senate Bill 6346. That's the millionaire's tax bill. And it does include a severability clause, meaning that if the tax, sort of the bigger millionaire's tax issue, gets stuck in the courts or in a voter initiative or for whatever reason has a challenge, um, preventing it from being implemented, the K-12 sales tax exemption remains in place. So really, really glad to see the legislature acknowledge and address the unintended consequence that they created last year. And so effective in just a couple more months, you all will be exempt from paying those taxes. And then additionally, important to note that MSOC and state-funded staff did receive the 2.6% inflationary adjustment in the final budget. Moving on to the not good news, just want to let you know where LEA, TTK, and bus depreciation landed in the final budget. Local effort assistance was reduced by about $25 million statewide. And essentially, where this is going to hit our districts that receive LEA is in calendar year 2027. In summary, in 2025, when legislators passed the budget last year, they raised the levy lid and said, okay, over the course of the biennium, we're also going to make sure that we're increasing levy equalization. And what they said they were going to do is increase by $150 per student in 2026, and then by $250 per student in 2027. And so where this $25 million reduction is hitting is on that 2027 increase. So in 2027, your LEA funding will go up by $150 per student, not $250 as originally written. Um, this is particularly disappointing due to the promises that were made last session to not only really try to equalize our districts who need and rely on LEA, but also there was promises to work to make this funding permanent, so passing a bill. Important to note, Representative Steve Berquist did introduce the bill at the beginning of session, and it did not progress. On the topic of transition to kindergarten or TTK, funding was reduced by about $27 million, or about 35% across the state, reducing available slots by about 2,400 statewide. There is a bill, Senate Bill 6260, that essentially contains the implementation language that OSPI will have to follow in order to essentially distribute the remaining slots that are left. And so, in summary, what that says is that the following students and programs are prioritized for TTK funding. First, school districts that already operate programs that serve the particular list of students that we're going to get into. And then after that, it does include the extreme childcare access desert requirement for any new programs that might receive TTK slots. Some of the students that are now going to be that are now going to have access to statewide or state-funded TTK programs are those who qualify for free or reduced price meals and lack access to childcare. Students who are eligible for ECAP or Head Start but not scheduled for enrollment. And then students who are eligible to receive special education or students who are English learners or multilingual learners. That's essentially where state-funded slots will land next year. OSPI is going to be working over the next couple of months to put together guidance and information as to how all of this will roll out. So be watching for that. Finally, on transportation or school bus depreciation, This has not changed since we last spoke. So though the funding in that section was reduced by approximately $21 million statewide, essentially extending school bus depreciation schedules from 8 to 10 years for Category A buses and from 13 to 15 years for Category C and D buses. Particularly, this applies only to buses that were scheduled for depreciation after September 2025. Additionally, reimbursement payments for zero emission buses have been adjusted to be at 33% of the total for the 25-26 school years through that says 2028-28. That should say 2027-28 school years. Um, just sort of want to offer a reflection that these are particularly troubling and challenging budget reductions for school districts, especially in the context of basic education being as underfunded as it is. And we as a system are worked so hard to reduce harm as much as we possibly could with our legislators and with the budget this session, and just want to acknowledge that these cuts are really hard for us to share with you, and I'm sure even harder for you all to have to navigate at the district level. So just feel like it's important to acknowledge that. Additionally, on the topic of the capital budget related to school facilities, there was a total investment of just over $94 million this year for modernization and safety programs, including the numbers you see on your screen. There's funding for small district modernization program, $71 million. That includes both planning grants for districts who applied there, as well as some of the actual construction grants for districts as well. Just about $14 million for seismic safety, and then another sort of collective $9 million for distressed school districts and the SCAP enhancement program pilot. So want to particularly plug that there was funding granted for schools in the capital budget. The small district modernization program was one of the items that was on our platform, our priorities list for 2026. I'm so thankful to see funding come to schools through this mechanism. I have been mentioning our final session summary document. This is your sneak preview of the top. This will be coming out later this afternoon through our typical InSession channel coming by email. And this document will essentially break down all of what we talked about today. There's a Word document that we made that essentially provides lots of details and resources for you, as well as lots of other ways that we're going to continue the work. So be sure to watch for that. And we hope that that's a document that's helpful for you all in communicating with your school board colleagues and with your communities about what has happened essentially during the 2026 session. As you're looking through it, if you have any questions for us, again, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Cynthia and I are here. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share and pass the mic over to Cynthia, who just has a couple questions that she's going to walk through with you all, just trying to get some feedback that will help to guide some of our work in the Advocacy Action Network this spring and summer to help improve our in-session legislative updates. Cynthia, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. So hi everyone. I'm just going to be gathering some feedback about InSession and particularly InSession Live. By chance, Logan, do you have the questions?
Yes, I
Okay.
think I can. I hit launch.
Okay, perfect. So you should be able to see a poll. And there's about four questions. They are not too lengthy. And so the first question is, has WASDA in session been worth your time? Second question is, do you have adequate resources to update your board colleagues as a result of WASDA in session? How could InSession Live be improved? You can check all that apply. Would you like to have more voices, guest presenters, have it be more conversational, or if you have anything else that you would like to add? And then the fourth question is, was the WASDA Bill Watch helpful? And this is for us. We want to make sure that we are giving you the most valuable resources and spending time with us in the most productive way. And so I see some of those are folks are filling it out. So thank you. And this will just make us continue to be better and better each year. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the poll and I will pass it to Logan and we'll do what's up next during interim.
Thanks, Cynthia, and thanks everyone for engaging. We know that we don't have a space necessarily here to sort of have a two-way dialogue. So we wanted to ask you some, sort of yes or no, single answer type questions. But if you have further thoughts or feedback for us, we would, of course, welcome that. Feel free to send us an email. And feel free to join our Advocacy Action Network conversations this summer, where we'll be holding some space to talk through them in more detail. Okay, getting our slides back up on the screen. We are going to share a little bit about what's coming next as we get ready for the interim. I must have made some slides here. I just talked about the Advocacy Action Network. That group will be getting together on March 24th at noon. That is on Tuesday. And during that time, we're really going to be focusing on essentially kicking off and navigating the interim, again, that period between legislative session end and the next legislative session starting. We will be also joined by some of our partners that have been doing work on educational funding. So you don't want to miss that space, and we hope you'll join us. That group will also meet monthly over the course of the interim. When we're together next week, we'll essentially be sharing with you the schedule for the next 7 or 8 months that'll get us through December. So we're trying to give you all a schedule in advance. And as much as we can sort of fill in early topics that we'll want to talk about together so that you have a predictable schedule and sort of are informed about what we'll be talking about each month so that you can decide where and when your time is best spent. Additionally, I mentioned at the beginning, especially around our policy bills, there will be model policies that work their way through the WASDA system over the course of the next couple of months. We sort of inside the agency made this big document with all the bills and passed it over to our policy and legal department, who will be working to make tweaks as necessary to model policies as a result of all this work. So watch for the summer issue of that document from our policy and legal team later this year. And then again, we just really wanted to say thank you so much for engaging. We hope this was a useful and valuable space to you. Cynthia and I are always open to hearing from you about your experience, taking feedback that will help us to create the best space possible for you all to receive legislative updates for us. During the interim, again, most of our space and energy will be dedicated towards our Advocacy Action Network for updates like this as we prepare for the next legislative session. So sign up over there if you haven't done that yet. And we'll see many of you around this spring and summer at regional meetings. We hope to see you in person in your areas, as well as through our ongoing advocacy work. So once again, thank you for being with us. Thank you for spending your lunch hours with us on Fridays during this session. And Cynthia and I will see you soon. Thanks, everyone. Take care.